All right, welcome to the spoiler section. Man, this movie is just sort of a mess. Um, so from the very onset of the plot, like the very first thing you get in the movie is this obnoxious sing-along song that's very Disney. It's very intentionally a parody, and a lot of it's very on the nose. Like, expect that. This whole movie, every joke is so on the nose. Like, you can't help but get it. You know, everyone's gonna get every joke in this movie. And the song is this. It's all about how humans are gods, and they're gonna take us to the great beyond, where everything will be great. Every wish you ever had is gonna come true. And it's really easy, and like some of the funnier lines in it are basically revolve around how sure they are that nothing bad is going to happen to them. And that's the theme. Like, the song wraps up a lot about how the movie is done. It's very easy jokes, very on the nose, very in your face about its message, and it's very, very message driven, which is a big part of why I didn't personally enjoy it. Because the message is easy. The message isn't something like I heard that the filmmakers considered the main message of the film to being to live for today. And what they mean is like live for today in the context of religion versus atheism. The film really pits the idea that like if you're religious, you are not as free to do what you would want to do. Versus if you were an atheist, you can do whatever you want, and that your life will somehow be more fulfilling because you'll be able to do those things. Now, the biggest problem I have with this is that people don't latch on to religion. People don't live religious lives because they think about the day-to-day, right? The promise of the great beyond, even in the movie, right? Everyone wants to go to that place after. It's about death. If the great beyond represents heaven, then death has to be a part of the equation, which is not in this movie. They never address death directly, because as soon as you address death directly, the message starts to fall apart. Because it starts to be like, instead, like, live every day for today is one thing. But, as soon as death enters the picture, it's like, what happens after? And, atheism's never offered an answer for that other than, like, you're just dead, which, not a lot of people super love that answer, which is why religion is still around and still something that people think about. This movie suggests that you can fill like that void of like what happens after death with having lots of sex, maybe doing drugs, and that'll somehow make it better. Like it'll help it. That's what I mean. Because death's never addressed in the movie, there's no real clear message as to what the argument for atheism is in the movie, other than the food can find out for a fact that their religion is wrong. Like, for a fact. Like, they find a cookbook, and apparently that's like the end all be all of. It's fine. But there's nothing like that ever going to happen, in the real world. So it ends up just preaching to the choir. It's not going to convince a religious person of anything other than, like, atheists sure are smug, aren't they? The rest, the characters are actually fine with this. I'm not a big fan of Michael Cera, but he did a great job as the stubby little sausage in this. Like, he's sort of like a dork, but he ends up cracking a lot of the code. There's a very strange subplot about doing bath salts. Like, they have a character that's played by James Franco who does bath salts, and when he does bath salts, he can see the food as they really are, like the animated talking versions. And I guess they picked bath salts because they're a bunch of stoners, and like they wanted to pick a drug that none of them would do on a regular basis, so they landed on bath salts. There's a lot of really weird gore at the end, like human gore. Like, people die in this movie. There's a point where the Michael Cera sausage teams up with other people and they murder a guy just so they can get back to the store because he needs to help out Seth Rogen's character. And at the end, they're killing all of the people in the store so that they can be free of the humans. And like, even in its own little universe, like, they don't address what would happen the minute somebody showed up at the store. The food would all be doomed again. Like, it's sloppy. It's sloppy. Just like its message about atheism is sloppy, the actual plot of the movie is sloppy because they can't offer resolution to the food because they're doomed. They're doomed to just be in a store forever the minute like more humans walk in, and they'll be unprepared for it. The movie tries to sidestep this a little by having them realize, and for me this was a very fridge nuking, shark jumping moment where the characters realize they're a cartoon in a movie played by actors. Like Seth Rogen makes sure to get his face on there. He's like, "You're not a sausage, you're a guy played by a bad comedian named Seth Rogen." And it's dumb. It's really dumb. And they go through this Stargate, and they call it a Stargate even, because, you know, why bother come up with something new when you have like an easy go-to reference? So they walk through that, and that's the end of the movie. That's how they sidestep the fact that they have no solid message or clear theme, or, you know, it's listening to somebody who has recently decided that they're atheist try and argue with you about it because they haven't really thought it out enough. They haven't really given it the time or come up with a coherent argument other than, well, religion is obviously wrong, which is not going to convince anyone who's actually religious. So I don't know. I keep going back to that. I'm sorry. I keep going back to that. It's the biggest thing that bothered me about the movie, that it's trying to be a gross, goofy comedy. And I loved when the movie wasn't taking itself too seriously, when it was being a Pixar parody about food coming to life. That was all funny. That was all great. It's just there's such a heavy-handed, like, attempt at a message in there. And the fact that it's so heavy-handed while being so muddled is why the movie ends up not being anywhere as good as it could have been. In some ways, like, at the beginning, it felt like it was adding to the movie because it was about more than just being a parody. But by the end of the movie, it's so tiresome and worn out of, like, a bit that you're just sick of it. And this is only an hour and a half long. Like, it's only an hour and a half long, and it still drags in places and feels very long in a bad way for me. You're going to see a lot of good reviews. You're going to see a lot of other reviews. And you're going to know by the end of watching, like, 2 or 3 of them if this movie is for you. People are going to oversell it. I guarantee it. They're going to say this movie is somehow brilliant. This movie is somehow groundbreakingly amazing. The only ground it breaks is that it's animated. Everything else is pretty standard fare for Rogen and crew. So if you like Rogen and crew, go see it. If you're like me and think that a lot of post-Apatow Seth Rogen movies have been kind of lacking, I doubt this one's going to win you over, unless you just really like animation. So, again, just to recap, this is not a recommend from me personally, although I recognize that it is a well-made film. I find it to be just a total mess of a feature when it comes to once you scratch beyond the surface. Just watch the trailer again, man. The trailer's better than the movie. Like, all the best scenes are in the trailer anyways. Just watch the trailer. Don't expect much more than the trailer. Don't expect anything other than heavy-handed, knock-on-your-head, atheist message. So yeah, bit shorter this week. I hope you enjoyed this solo review. Hopefully we'll have some panelists for next week again. Yeah, and thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next week on Stubtown.